Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Ivan Šemiš, and today I will give you a presentation on international business communication standards. So, on today's agenda, first, I will give you a brief background of IBCS Institute, a company that is behind creating the international business communication standards. Then we will talk about standards themselves and what are the advantages of standardized data presentation. And lastly, I will show you how we at Megatrend Poslovna Rješenja tackle the application of standards in everyday business. So let's begin with the IBCS Institute. The IBCS Institute, also known as Hichard Heist, is host, a training institute and a certification body for Creative Commons projects called IBCS, or International Business Communication Standards. In 2004, Dr. Rolf Hichard founded the Hichard & Partners AG as a consulting company, which had a focus on professional business presentation and management reports. In 2007, Hichard & Partners entered the seminar business in cooperation with Baron AG, a Swiss seminar company, Swiss seminar and event management company. And to this date, more than 6,000 participants have taken part in their training courses and lectures. In 2013, Mr. Jürgen Feist joined the company. He then helps transfer major parts of Dr. Hichard's intellectual property in what is now known as Creative Commons IBCS project, and is now governed by the newly founded IBCS Association. They publish the IBC standards under a Creative Commons license with a goal to ease further development and international acceptance. In 2014, Dr. Rolf Hichard and Jürgen Feist decided to run company as partners, and as of January 2015, a company is relocated to Hilden, Germany, and is renamed Hichard Feist GmbH. Today, Hichard Feist serves as IBCS Institute, hosting IBCS projects, giving IBCS training courses, acting as IBCS certification body, and providing educational material on IBCS. So what are IBCS, or International Business Communication Standards? Well, there are a set of practical proposals for designing reports, presentations, dashboards, and visualizations, also for designing diagrams, tables, and other elements contained within those reports. The standards involve the conception of the content and the visual participation and application of semantic notion. So business communication meets the IBCS standard when it complies with the rules of the 7 success areas in the success formula. And those 7 areas are SAY, which is covering conveying a message; Unify, which is covering applying the semantic notion; Condense, which is covering increasing information density; Check, which is ensuring visual integrity; Express, which is choosing proper visualizations; Simplify, which is avoiding clutter; and Structure, which is organizing content. Now, we will go over these 7 areas independently and talk about each and every one of them. So first, we have SAY, which is conveying a message. Conveying a message means that the reports and presentations, both as a whole and both as within their individual components like visualizations and tables, charts, different objects, intend to say something to recipients. Messages in this sense can be determinations, questions, explanations, clarifications, or recommendations, and some other forms of statements. In order to convey a message, we first have to know what our goal for the presentation is, and what we want to achieve both for us and for our target audience. Our own goals and what we want to achieve for us is more easily determined, but in order for our presentation to be useful to our audience, it is important that we know them. So, for example, we should know something about their function, position in the company network, their knowledge, their experiences, attitude, cultural backgrounds, anything that would help us compose the presentation to better suit their needs and to better also answer their questions. Also, it is important to know what is it they want to get out of the presentation. Is it only information, or are they making decisions based on presented information? Once we understand what we want to achieve with our presentation, it is time to introduce a message. This process begins by compiling and presenting the related facts, and those facts that we are presenting are usually already known to our audience. After presenting them, we have to explain the problem by introducing a challenge or complication that affects our audience. This is done by raising the relevant questions from the perspective of the recipient on how to solve the challenge. This finishes the introduction part, and now we are going to deliver that message, which means we are going to answer the questions that we raised in the introduction part. And those messages that we are delivering must the text explain or suggest points that are going to be explained later in the larger details. In order to support our message, we should provide evidence by facts and figures in order to prove it. In doing so, we must use precise wording, terms like relevant, significant, or around can be oftentimes misleading, and they can lead to misinterpretations and misunderstandings. Also, naming the source of facts that we use raises the credibility of our message. Lastly, we summarize the message by briefly repeating it, followed by a presented solution and also explanation of the consequences that that solution brings. After we defined our message, we are moving to the next success item, which is Unify. And Unify covers all aspects of applying semantic notion in presentations, reports, and visualizations. We start by unifying terminology. This means that standardization of terms and abbreviations in reports using an ambiguous language. And this is done by by standardizing them all, and then afterwards creating a glossary, which will help clarify what all abbreviations and terms mean. This part also covers the unifying data formats. Numbers, for example, are they separated with commas or points? Do they have decimal points after the whole number? Then units, currency, other physical units, are they presented or not, in which format? Then we also have to unify descriptions. The descriptions are textual elements that describe presented visual elements. There are forms of messages, titles, subtitles, page titles, measures, also legends on visualizations and labels, and they also must be kept clear and easy to understand. All data that we are presenting is part of some dimensions. For example, all business measures such as sales, profit, quantity, or margin are part of measure dimensions, where all months, quarters, and years make a time dimension, for example. Dealing with measure dimension, it is important to differentiate between basic measures and ratio measures, which are calculated from them. So a ratio measure is calculated from two or more basic measures. Basic measures have the recurrency of physical units, and they are neither shares of something nor quotients of two measures. Also, by IBCS standard on visualizations, they are always represented by thicker, more bold lines or bars, while on the other side, ratio measures that are percentages or parts of a whole are usually presented with thinner lines and bars, up to 50% thinner than basic measures. We are up to our next success formula item, which is condensed. And condensed covers all aspects of increasing information density so that the report visualization or presentation contains all necessary information on one page. In order to increase information density, we start by reducing all sizes of all components to the smallest possible size where they still remain legible. This means that we are reducing the size of all elements such as legends, descriptions, titles, subtitles, and their fonts, and also the size of all objects such as charts, tables, visualizations, and other objects. Apart from shrinking everything, the easiest way to increase density is to properly utilize free space. We can see on the image on the slide the example of not properly utilized free space, where on a single presentation sheet there is a lot of blank area left unused and unutilized. Other ways of achieving better utilization of space is also by using narrow page margins and reducing empty space in tables and visualizations by rearranging them or using different sorts that have less empty space to show off. Also, to help us with the condensing our views, we can also add more data to existing visualizations. By adding more data points, we can better explain the content and the message that visualization is trying to send. This is best evident on some time series charts, where adding additional data time periods can unveil the relationships which are not obvious when we use a limited data set. Another way of adding data is to add more dimensions, which then broaden the picture that is being presented instead of using the entire visualization to present single dimension over single measure dimension. Also, we can combine charts with each other, like bar charts and line charts, or embed charts in tables. Lastly, in order to condense space, we can adjust elements of the report and presentation by using small charts for a comparison of similar data. Also, related charts that are then ordered on the single page, and charts combined with tables and embedded in tables, as I said in the previous example. Check section covers all aspects of ensuring visual integrity in reports and visualizations, and that means that all data that is presented must be truthful and most easily understood. And this is a way of avoiding misleading visuals. So the things we have to check in our visualizations, presentations, charts is first of all visualization elements. One of mostly misrepresented elements on visualizations are axes. So the things we have to avoid while using visualizations is trying axis, which distort values and send wrong messages. Logarithmic axis, which have no visual comparison of values. Different classes and sizes of data on axis, which means if you have grouped data, each group represented on an axis must be of the same size, and axes which are not even cut. After we check all the visualization elements, we have to check our presentation or visualization for misleading representation, which means that the graphical representation is different than the underlying data. Here we should use correct areas on visualization for comparisons. For example, if we are comparing two sizes, two different sizes, we should use correct area visualization and not a different not a different comparison. Lastly, on our checklist is scales. One example of that scaling is image on the slide, where we have two different currency measures, and they're represented as equal on the picture, while clearly on the right side and on the product cost scale, we can see that values for the product cost are much lower than the values for the revenue, which is on the left side. So if there are more than one measured data on visualizations with identical measure units, we must apply same scales for both, or the result might be misleading. Also, if we have comparing charts that are on different scales, if possible, we should use scaling indicators. They connect different visualizations with different scales by showing the percentage of the chart on the first, on the percentage of chart that is used on the first to represent the data on the second chart. Express is, as I said, covering all aspects of choosing the right visualization for your data. Choosing the appropriate object type is of prime importance for the comprehension and comparison in reports. So while choosing objects, we use tables for looking up data. They also have high information density and are clear, but we cannot usually use them to highlight important information and examples or exceptions because of the data clutter in them. So on the other side, we have charts that then we use to highlight important information from the raw data, and so taking that into consideration, choosing the right chart is very important. There are some types of charts and data that there are some types of data and also charts that best describe them. So if we have a data set which is development over time, best to use this horizontal axis emphasis. If we have a structured data, we have a vertical axis emphasis. Then for multiple values, recommended charts would be scatter and plot types. For multiple data series, stocked column charts. For root causes over time, waterfall charts. Then for structure of single point in time, vertical line chart, and for two measures in a single visual entity, special line chart. Once chart is selected, it is good to explain the causes by showing interrelations and independencies in data. Seeing the entire context, especially extreme and deviant values, helps explain the causality in them. Details increase not only to the level of credibility, but also comprehension. We should use charts to prove, explain, and render something plausible, and not merely as a decoration. Our last part of success formula is simplify. Basically, it means avoid clutter. So all components and characteristics which are too complicated, redundant, distraction, or merely decorative should be avoided or removed from presentations, charts, visualizations. We can divide them in layout components like unnecessary background, logos, background colors, fields, then borders that are not necessary. This chart that you can see on the slide is an example of a very cluttered chart. There is a background color, there is a border around it which shouldn't be there. Also, the other category is to simplify styles. As I said, to remove all unnecessary borders, to remove unnecessary shades, avoid 3D presentation of data in charts. Not only that it creates clutter, but it can be misleading with its design. Also, grid lines, value access, large data labels, like the clutter of the data labels on our x-axis here, large numbers, and in the last category of details, we should avoid labels for small values, obvious terms, and repeated and superfluous words. I apologize, there is one more part of our success formula, which is structured. And structure tells us that context should follow a logical structure, which is corresponding elements should be consistent and exhaustive without any overlap. Consistency, which means to use consistent items, consistent types of statements, wordings, and visualizations. So if we are presenting the same measures over different periods of time, we should, and putting it to two different visualizations, use the same visualizations to show both graphs and both data sets. Also, all our items like labels, titles, subtitles, legends in visualizations should be consistent and show identical over all our visualizations. Then we have the area of overlapping, which means that the overlapping of business measures in themselves and structural dimensions in themselves should be avoided. Their elements should be mutually exclusive. As you can see on the picture on the slide, we have a time dimension here, and data for quarters and months overlaps, and it's not disjoint and not mutually exclusive. The structure does not represent data correctly. Now I would like to move on to the application part and tell you something about what we here at Megatrend Poslovne Rješenja do with International Business Communication Standards. So whenever we can, with all our clients, we are trying to implement International Business Communication Standards where the opportunity allows that. it helps present them their data. And in response to that need, earlier this year, we decided to launch a new project, which is custom visualizations project. We are implementing that project on IBM's Cognos platform, where we use our knowledges and experiences to create custom visualizations that will, in only few easy clicks, transform our client's data to the data that is presented by the International Business Communication Standard. I would like to show you some of those visualizations now and talk a little bit about them. This is one of the first visualizations we developed. It shows one structural dimension and three measures. Three measure dimensions, actually one measure dimension, but divided in three scenarios. All you need to do is drag your data in the data slots of the visualization. Data that is dragged can be raw, unformatted from your database, and the programming of the visualization will automatically format your data to the format assigned by the International Business Communication Standard. Here we can see that we have the comparison of the values for current year, previous year, and budget, and also their deltas. Here are deltas in percentages as ratios. This visualization requires you that you put in your own calculated measures of deltas, which means that you can customize what sort of ratio you want to see. Does it going to be a percentage or index type, or the cumulative ratio? On our next visualization, we have a similar presentation. The main difference here is that the columns showing relative and index deltas are pre-calculated from the raw data inserted in visualization. So the formulas are already embedded in the visualization, and all we as a user have to do are take the raw data of a dimension like a product type, along with the measure dimension of revenue for two scenarios, current year and previous year, for example. Here we can also have other scenarios, but this one shows only two data columns, and the deltas in the visualization will be calculated by themselves. Third visualization that we have is the waterfall. This waterfall represents as I said, it is best for using for presenting base columns and total columns. We have base columns of countries with total columns of regions here, and also present the difference in two different scenarios. In this case, this is the scenario for the values of current year and some budget or plan. So we can visually see the differences between the two different use scenarios. This is another form of waterfall, but this type of visualization is more aimed to the financial reports. Here we have as a set of data one income statement, and on the chart side we have presented charts of all incomes and expenses, adding and subtracting one from another to get to have at the bottom the visual representation of our profit after tax or loss. And the last two visualizations that we have developed they look the same, so I will show it only once. First of them presents data in the background for the previous period, which is represented with those columns with no fill. And then in the front, we have two different sets of data. We have data for current period, which is represented with darker black columns. And at the point where that data ends, which is current month, the data is picked up from the budget or forecast column and continued for the month where the current year data stopped. The second type of visualization that is the same, instead of picking up the data where the current year data stopped, calculates the forecast. So it uses only two columns, two columns of raw data, column for previous year and column for current year. And where data for current year ends, the lighter gray areas are filled with calculated measures for the given measure dimension. So in conclusion, we saw international business communication standards and that are as a set of guidelines which help us organize and structure our data to be more presentable and to help deliver the right message. Also, at the application part, at the end, we saw how visualizations that are created for a simple platform can help you as a customer transform data, where you use them just to drag your raw data in, and all the transformations and all adjustments to make it to conform to the standard are done by the visualization itself. And now I would like to thank you for your attention